summers, don't I? Got it looking mighty easy for a come up, don't I? Dreams so big that my ideas are hard to stomach, don't I? Yeah, got it jumping 10 years later, don't I? Execute so well.
What's up, guys? I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I may have a confession to make. I'm obsessed with Resident Evil. Now, I'm not quite sure that needs to be said, as most of you watching this likely found me through my coverage of that series or games inspired by it. But what some of you may not know is I have an equally unhealthy obsession with the differences that can crop up when porting a game to multiple systems. I really couldn't tell you why, but I've just always really enjoyed finding those small details that might have been altered during the porting process or differences you'll see in video when jumping from one system to the next. And in that same vein, I have always thought Resident Evil Code Veronica is a criminally unappreciated entry in the dynasty that is the RE franchise, so I figured why not head pop 2 zombies with one shotgun blast. Today I'm looking to dig deep into the many versions of this lesser-loved entry and find out exactly how they differ, and if possible, figure out which one is most deserving of your time. So after an uncomfortably long absence, it feels great to say once again, what's up guys, I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews. Welcome to the Resident Evil Retrospective.
It is almost time, you genetically inferior siblings.
Resident Evil Code Veronica is a bit of a black sheep in the classic survival horror entries of the series, but at least a portion of the audience fell in love with Claire Redfield's return to the series. It should probably go without saying, but I've already covered this title pretty extensively in a past video in my Resident Evil retrospective, but just to catch some of the newbies up, Code Veronica sees Claire from RE2 setting out to find her brother. After being a particularly annoying thorn in Umbrella's side, she is eventually captured and taken to an island training facility that I guess they were also using as a holding cell for people that needed to be gotten rid of. During her stay, there was some kind of an attack on the island, and the T-virus seems to have been purposefully spread, causing even further chaos. After realizing the place was doomed, one of her jailers let Claire out of her cell, and the first leg of the game is spent attempting to escape this hellhole with a friend she met along the way, Steve. A person who's so Canadian, and this is true, the whole of Canada agrees he's taking it a bit too far.
Sorry about that little misunderstanding, but I thought you were another one of those monsters. Shut up!
The two eventually unravel the history of Umbrella's creation and the family behind it. Sitting at the head of that family is a guy who, in the absence of his twin sister, sort of lost his mind and has been essentially cosplaying her until he can see her again. The rest of the game turns in a few unexpected directions, including the reveal that Chris is no longer missing and is actively retracing Claire's steps, culminating in what I would call a pretty damn enjoyable time. But sadly, there's a lot of you watching right now who wouldn't agree. For some reason, this game catches a lot of hell, which was a huge revelation for me to find out. When I released my video on this during the heyday of the Resident Evil retrospective, I was shocked to see so many people in the comments having such negative things to say about it. To be totally honest, I had always just figured everyone loved the game the same way I did. Now, it seems like there are a few complaints that crop up when this title is discussed, but the most odd was a common theme of the game being too difficult, something that seems strange to me because CP has never really given me too many issues at all. In a typical playthrough, I'm able to keep my handgun ammo above 150 at all times, and here's the amount of green herbs I collected just before the first tyrant fight. And it's not like I'm some kind of expert at dodging zombies. I put down easily 85 to 90% of the zombies I come across, and as far as herbs go, I've actually made it a personal rule that first aid sprays are never to be used during any RE playthrough. By the way, don't ask me why, because I have literally no idea. For Christ's sakes, I still save like a crazy person, so it's not like I'm going for that coveted S rank on completion. Apparently, I'm just a little unhinged. And by the way, by no means is this me trying to brag to you guys, because I'm not even that good at the game compared to most people who play it. My point is, I just don't know where all these comments about the game's difficulty are coming from. On that note, though, if I did have a list of advice to those of you that have stayed away, I'd say numbers 1 through 10 would be use the knife more. In this game, a downward strike can hit multiple times, and once you're good with judging the right distance, you can clear most rooms without ever firing a single bullet. And yes, you are probably going to take a little bit of damage during that process, but I find this game to be pretty forgiving as far as zombie grabs go. On top of that, make sure to start unloading your grenade launcher from the starting position with BOW rounds during the Tyrant fight, and you'll never even have to see him on screen before you kill him. No joke, I've been doing this so long I've got it memorized. 3 BOW rounds, 2 acid rounds, hit the button, boom, bought your uncle. And for the last two, save often, and if you come across what seems to be the end of a section, make sure to put all of your hard-hitting weapons in the item box so Chris has access to them and vice versa. If you get those tips down, I think you'll find a much easier experience here, but we're not exactly running a tips and tricks channel, so why not jump into the stuff you all came here to see in the first place?
Got you now.
As some of you may have noticed, we started with the original Dreamcast release of Code Veronica, and as all of you may have noticed, it looks absolutely amazing. There's no doubt the Dreamcast was a pretty impressive little piece of hardware, but if you ask me, this was the best looking game in its library, at least as far as convincingly realistic graphics go. As is common knowledge at this point, before this release, Resident Evil was well known for its pre-rendered backgrounds and static camera angles. But Code Veronica introduced a slight evolution to those approaches with fully rendered 3D environments, which in turn allowed for a camera that was still static in placement, but could track player in certain areas. These two elements put together, at the time, always struck me as the natural direction the series would grow in as it kept getting bigger, and yes, I'm still a little pissed off that didn't come true. With 3D environments comes lighting that can be both cast on your character and the background, and this stuff really blew me away at the time. Now, of course, looking at Claire holding a lighter and seeing it not only light her realistically, but the room around her isn't going to impress anyone today, but we hadn't seen anything even nearing this in the series up to this point. Next up on my long list of stuff I love about this game's presentation is the incredibly detailed zombie models. Not only are all the gory little details I want on full display here, but there's also a huge variety of individual zombies to boot. Sadly, a headshot from a shotgun no longer decapitates them, and to be honest, I've always wondered if this was a move meant to save on processing power, or a lazy way to make sure they didn't need to make any changes in the game in order to fit a decent Sarah rating in Japan. Character models and cutscenes are an absolute treat, with lots of details being present and some very impressive facial animations for the time. I'm sure it's not the best I've seen, but it's most definitely the best I've seen on the Dreamcast. The inventory still uses 2D sprites for its icons, and I still absolutely love that. You also get to see a nice variety of locations, with each one containing a lot of environmental details and a very lived-in kind of feel. All around, this is just an incredible looking game, but more than that, it truly feels like the RE series really jumping into the next generation of gaming hardware, which was certainly a treat at the time, but is even more impressive looking back retroactively today. Seeing as the next time we would see a generational jump like this in the main series, it would be for a game that plays like RE about as much as a session of Bubble Bobble does. What you're looking at right now is being provided by a relatively cheap Retrobit VGA cable, which is outputting a surprisingly clean 480p image to my OSSC that simply line doubles that to an integer scale of 960p. For the longest time, I've been using a JP21 cable for my Dreamcast because I thought I needed to spend an arm and a leg to get clean signal out of the console, but it is clear I was dead wrong. If you look at them side by side, the difference between the JP21 cable's 480i and the VGA cable's 480p is about as clear can possibly get. Sadly, all of that amazing quality does come with a downside though. At this point in console hardware, dithering was just a fact of life, and almost every major console used this little trick to save on performance, at least some of the time. And if you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, dithering is this checkerboard type pattern you can see in the background here. This was essentially a workaround that allowed the console to have a lot of colors on screen without having to render a smooth gradient between each shade. And you know it worked really well if this is the first time you're seeing it. Typically, the combination of a CRT display and a composite video connection blurred the image enough to mask a lot of dithering on most consoles, so I apologize if I just lifted the veil for you. Personally, I love the way a dithered picture looks on an old console, but I know that's not a universal opinion, so keep that in mind if you're looking to play Code Veronica at higher resolutions on real Dreamcast hardware. Other than that, though, I really can't see any problems with this game graphically speaking. Not only does it look incredible to my eye, but it also looks better than just about anything the Dreamcast had to offer at the time. It took the bright, popping colors the console was known for and combined them into a Resident Evil game, which should be a combination that spells disaster. But somehow it worked out just perfectly. If you ask me, the console this game was made for is a huge contributing factor to its unique look, and even as the series would continue on bigger and better hardware, I'd say Code Veronica is one of the most visually unique entries in the franchise. So I guess the only question left is what happens when you take that unique display and try to cram it into a Sony console?
Wait a second. What just happened?
I despise Chris.
What are you gonna do to him?
With the re-release of Code Veronica on different platforms, Capcom elected to do something you really don't see too much anymore. They added some stuff. The games released with the Code Veronica X title have had additions that alter the gameplay to a degree that, honestly, it's sort of hard to argue whether or not they're improvements. First off, the short title screen intro has been altered so that Wesker's reveal doesn't get ruined, which I guess is okay. I mean, the fact that old Blondie was in the game was plastered all over game magazines of the day, so I'm not too sure who they're trying to protect from spoilers here. In addition, there have been extra Wesker scenes added to the game, which sort of undoes the point of messing with the original intro, in my opinion. In the new scene, just before Alfred starts the island self-destruct sequence, Wesker shows up. And my only real issue with that is the original scene where he first shows up in the original release of the game did a good job of obscuring his face and sort of keeping you guessing. Where in CVX, he just sort of shows up to accomplish nothing much at all. And the best part is that original scene with his face obscured is still in the game during Chris's campaign. So now you'll meet Wesker and then an hour later watch a cutscene that tries its hardest to make sure you don't know Wesker's in the game. Which is, I don't know, kind of funny, really, when you think about it. Getting into the comparisons, I would say the PS2 has a pretty bad showing, actually. Man, what is it with Capcom and screwing up PS2 ports? So starting out, I was immediately hit with this very nasty ghosting in the games in motion. Here, let me slow things down so YouTube's compression can't mess it up. Hopefully you can see the issue I'm talking about here. It's that shadow of Claire that's visible in every other frame. It looks to me like interpolation, something that shouldn't be necessary. I mean, I've got to assume the PS2 is powerful enough to run this game at full speed, so why would they implement something like this? I can't really imagine someone would think this was a good stylistic choice, so I tried looking it up on Google, but it seems like no one's noticed this, except for this guy here, but after reading his thread, most people seem to be blaming his TV. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking, and no, this was not caused by my scaler. Both the FrameMeister and OSSC display the same issue, and I can confirm it does still exist at native 480i over component. Honestly, I would have loved to have solved this mystery, but I think it's going to have to stay just that for now. In the meantime, let's all collectively try and figure out why some text has artifacts at the edges of its boundaries. If I had to take a shot in the dark, I might guess that this has something to do with the fact that the Dreamcast outputs a sort of non-standard width for its video output. Maybe taking sprite sheets from one console to another ended up doing this somehow. In the Dreamcast original, I noticed that getting the perfect downward knife angle was sort of hard since the D-pad on the old DC controller could be so loose that it would register diagonal.